Pharaoh has two dreams that are very troubling to him. In the morning, his spirit was troubled, and he called for the magicians of Egypt and all the wise men thereof. And Pharaoh told them his dream, but there was none that could interpret them unto Pharaoh.
You also don't want to give an interpretation that's wrong, because you might find yourself as the chief baker and hanging from a tree.
Yeah. So it's at that point that the chief butler remembered, and he said, wait a minute. There was a prisoner, a Hebrew slave who was a prisoner, who interpreted the dream for me and the butler, or the baker rather, and his interpretation happened exactly the way he told us it would. And so notice what happens in 14. Then Pharaoh sent and called Joseph, and they brought him hastily out of the dungeon, and he shaved and changed his raiment and came in unto Pharaoh. So he shaves, changes his raiment, puts on new clothes, and then comes in unto Pharaoh. And Pharaoh told him the dreams. And look at the humility of Joseph from moment number one. It's this moment of I can deliver myself from bondage. If I get this right, if I get him to like me, I'm going to be free. And he could say, I am one of the finest interpreters of dreams in the history of the world. But notice what he does instead. Verse 16. Joseph answered Pharaoh, saying, it is not in me. God shall give Pharaoh an answer of peace. Isn't that beautiful? Even in that moment, with everything available to Joseph, if he builds himself up, he chooses to glorify God. There's something Christ-like about that. At any time when people try to give Jesus any credit or any praise, what is his instinctive response? Why callest thou me good? There is but one good, and that's my Father which is in heaven. Nevertheless, glory be to the Father. He's always glorifying God. I love that principle. And Joseph's following up beautifully here. So then Pharaoh recounts the two dreams. And Joseph said in verse 25, the dream of Pharaoh is one, and God hath shown Pharaoh what he is about to do. That these dreams are showing you a scenario of this is what's going to happen. Now you don't have to wait in regret at the end of that terrible experience of 7 years of famine to say, man, I wish I had done something differently. God is giving you the answer in advance so you can prepare. And there's something beautifully Christ-like about that, about what Joseph is doing here, preparing the way for God on high to save his people from a pending death. And not just his people, but all the nations of that region of the world at that time, which to them was the whole world from their perspective, from their view, right? So notice after he gives the interpretation of you're going to have 7 years of plenty followed by 7 years of famine. So it's really simple. You just make huge food stores during the years of plenty and you're going to survive those years of famine. At which point Pharaoh says we need to find one to oversee this effort. And look at verse 39. And Pharaoh said unto Joseph, forasmuch as God hath shown thee all this, there is none so discreet and wise as thou art. Thou shalt be over my house, and according unto thy word shall all my people be ruled. Only in the throne will I be greater than thou. So verse 41 and 42 says, and Pharaoh said unto Joseph, see, I have set thee over all the land of Egypt. And Pharaoh took off his ring from his hand and put it upon Joseph's hand and arrayed him in vestures of fine linen and put a gold chain about his neck. Did you notice the various articles of clothing that Joseph has found himself dressed in through these chapters? And now the king is putting on him fine clothing and a gold chain. It's that ultimate enduo that the world has to offer. The very finest clothing, Joseph is now arrayed in the best of the best that the world has to offer. And I think that's simply a place-holding metaphor or symbol for what happens every time we go to the temple of our God, for this experience to be endowed, to put on the robe of righteousness, the very finest that is representative of the eternities, of God promising someday that He will put a ring on our finger, a gold chain around our neck, and the finest clothing. Those images, it's powerful as you've watched Joseph, and you know where he's come from, and you know what he's been through, and you know every point. Any one of these could have been exit ramp off of the covenant path.
Could have been a tragedy.
It could have become a tragedy, but he keeps it on this constant upward flow. Verse 46 tells you that Joseph was 30 years old when he stood before Pharaoh, king of Egypt. So remember, that story began at age 17. Again, now we're at 30. So in the 7 plenteous years, the earth brought forth by handfuls. And Joseph is in charge of all of Egypt, and he's going around and he's gathering it in. And it's not just fruit that the earth is producing, but God is magnifying and now multiplying Joseph himself. He is given a wife in verse 45, Asenath, the daughter of Potiphera, priest of On, and through her, the firstborn son is born in verse 51, named Manasseh, and then the secondborn is in 52, named Ephraim. And we'll talk more about their stories in a coming episode, as they are going to be adopted in to the house of Israel directly.